we're going to start off with Bruce Ash telling us what's going on with the Rules Committee. I noticed we have a lady from Utah. What gives on the Convention Rules Committee, Bruce? Because you're chairman of the RNC Rules Committee, and how those two things interrelate.
Right. Well, thanks for having me on the show. And, Chris, I'll try to speak as quickly as I can. I don't want to intercede on your time. I was the elected chairman 2 straight terms as the RNC Standing Committee on Rules chairman. By rule, the chairman of the RNC selects the Convention Rules Committee chairman. That's in the rules, and I did not expect to be named as the Convention Rules chairman, partly because of the standoff that Reince Priebus and I and a few other members had with him at our spring meeting this year. However, the naming of Enid Mickelson and Ron Kaufman was truly breathtaking. Because what that means is you have 2 Romney loyalists, a Bush loyalist as well with Kaufman. Kaufman was part of the Ben Ginsburg uprising that happened at the 2012 Rules Convention that led to so many bad things happening at that meeting. Priebus has also appointed Haley Barbour as the chairman of the Permanent Organization Committee. Now, normally what happens is when these committee chairmen are selected, you have a presumptive nominee, which we have a presumptive nominee. His name happens to be Donald Trump. Donald Trump has assigned certain leadership within his campaign, in this case Ed Brookover, to be a liaison at the RNC. It would appear as though either Mr. Brookover and Mr. Manafort and Mr. Lewandowski were asleep at the switch, or they didn't know enough about how the building works. They allowed the chairman of the RNC to throw in his people on these 2 extraordinarily important committees. And he bumped Mike Duncan, former RNC chairman, because Duncan wouldn't allow any kind of things to go on in that committee that would have denied Mr. Trump the nomination. I believe what we're seeing is an inside job. There is already beginning to appear to be discredit for the presumptive nominee within the RNC. And within Senate and House leadership. I don't know where this is going to lead. They still need to get the majority, a 2/3 majority of the members of the convention to suspend the rules with respect to unbinding the delegates on the first ballot. But these appointees are likely to be able to hold considerable sway over those committees. And, I'm going to be at my desk at the Convention Rules Committee. We will have a suite of rules changes, and we will be fighting any rules change that takes the delegates' votes away as they were originally intended for Donald Trump. And look, Donald Trump wasn't my first or second or third choice, but he did win the vote of 14 million voters. He is the presumptive nominee. And the last time we saw this happen was in 1912, and we know what happened in that election. We
Bruce,
we
I
had
couldn't
the worst
believe
president
was
of the 20th century.
One of the arguments made by some of the people that trying to overturn the Trump thing were, well, look what they did in 1912. They didn't follow that rule, and I'm going, yeah, boy, well, that was a good one, yeah, President Taft, right?
Well, and it was the same argument then. Vote your conscience. There's history that's now being revealed from that convention about conscience votes. We're seeing the same thing happen again. And I will say this for anybody listening: if I was the Arizona delegation chairman, we've all signed loyalty pledges, which is what we're supposed to do under Arizona revised statutes. Anybody who doesn't agree to vote for Donald Trump on the first ballot must be removed to the bleachers, and you bring down alternate number 1, 2, 3, however many you need in order to fill out the 58 delegate votes for Donald Trump on the first ballot.
Well, Bruce, I guess you were just a little too uppity for Mr. Priebus.
Well, look, I don't know that I would have been named anyway. Like I said, Mike Duncan was his first choice. However, he reversed course just really, I think, in the last few days, and named Ms. Mickelson and Mr. Kaufman. By the way, neither of those two chair and co-chair were trusted enough by their own state delegates to even name them to their delegation on the Convention Rules Committee. These were committee assignments made by the chairman, in spite of the fact neither Mickelson or Kaufman were elected by their own state.
Bruce, is anybody in the are we scooping the whole country here? Does anybody in the national conservative news media have this? Or are they just standing around watching the pop fly land?
Yeah, I don't think they've quite figured it out yet. I think Alex Eisenstadt at Politico and Alan Fram at AP will be jumping on this pretty quickly. Let me tell you, this is not just on Priebus. This is on Trump also. The men that he had supposedly in the RNC watching the chicken house weren't watching the chicken house, and they ought to be taken in back of that shed and shot in the back of the head, execution style, because they fell down in their duty. They let this happen. If this happens, if this is in fact what happens, that the nomination is going to be denied to Donald Trump, whether you love him or not, he won the thing fair and square. We had very specific rules on how a candidate must win 1,237 delegates. He's almost 1,600 delegates, and everybody else has suspended or dropped out completely. These men were there to make sure that nothing could happen to him, and they let this happen apparently.